Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025, and I'd like to welcome you to my channel. And I hope you had a safe and enjoyable Labor Day weekend. Well, let's get right into it with the updates in Ukraine. So, we had seen previously that the Russians had moved in this direction. Now, the deep state map is recognizing the potential advances of the Russian forces. And if we zoom out a little bit, we can see that the goal here is eventually to get up to this defensive line. So, anyway, you can see that there have been um, advances along this front line. And so the Russians are slowly moving up towards what looks like defensible positions with natural barriers, making it difficult for the Ukrainian army to push them back. So, anyway, if we go over to the um, Kyiv area, we can see that um, the Russian advances are not great, but there, there are a lot of Russian soldiers in this area pushing forward. So anyway, you can see Mala Sherbaki, Mala Tomachka. You can see Mirne. So if we go back here, um, let's get rid of these. So anyway, um, we have Mirne. So here's Mirne. Here's Malatokmachka, and we have Mali Sherbaki. So this whole line is very active. The Russians are pushing to try to move forward, and so um, this is an area of um, this is an area where the Ukrainians had maintained a stable front line, and the Russians are starting to push the Ukrainians back. So we're starting to see the Ukrainians cede territory little by little in this area. Now let's go to the next area of interest, and it is this whole area here. So Ivanivka to Novomikhailivka, this whole area, the Russians are pushing forward. There are a lot of Russian soldiers here. There's a lot of Russian resources going in this direction. So we can take a look here at this other map, and we can see that there is significant fighting in the past 24 hours. Um, so this report was from yesterday, a little after lunch. So we can see some of the main fighting points, and they're at what would be the front line. Um, so either some advanced forces have pushed their way through the Russia front lines to these areas, or the Russians really aren't in the yellow areas. So anyway, we can see that this whole area is a big area of fighting. So anyway, let's see if there's any advances that Deep State registered in the last. Um, so we do see advances here. We have Voskresenka. So we can see here advances of the Russian forces, and where are the other advances. So we can see actually in Dachne, so um, let's go back again. So we have Russians advancing here, and we have Ukrainians advancing here. What the Ukrainians want to do, of course, is to cut this whole area and leave these soldiers marooned, um, or at least force them to stop their advances. So, anyway, if we go to this again, we can see that there are this is definitely another area where Russia has a lot of soldiers and the Ukrainians do as well. So let's move to the next conflict area, which is the Pokrovsk area. So anyway, we can see that in this Institute for the Study of War map, that there are a lot of areas of fighting. So you can see the Russians are advancing um, in the Pokrovsk area, and the Ukrainians are advancing in the Mirnograd area. So the Ukrainians are advancing east of Mirnograd by Belitsky, and in this area by Zoloty Kolodaj. So anyway, you can see that the Russians are advancing in the Pokrovsk area, um, and the Ukrainians. So here's Mirnograd. Ukrainians are advancing in the Novoekonomichne area. So you can see that what the Ukrainians are trying to do is the Ukrainians are trying to advance here, and advance here. So supposedly the Russians have this part uh, covered, and so there hasn't been any fighting reporting in this area. So this may be an area where the Russians had advanced and then retreated. In any case, the the um the Russians are moving a lot of troops, and in Novo Alexandrivka there were Russian vehicles that were stopped by Ukrainian drones. So you can see this city, Novo Alexandrivka here. So this is where the vehicle stopped. The soldiers got off into the woods, into a protected area, and the vehicles were destroyed. So you can see how far back the you can see how far back the soldiers need to be dropped off to go on foot under cover of trees or other natural barriers in order to get to the front line. So anyway, this is slowing down the Russians, and this is another area of concern. So, but in any case, one area that the Russians are supposedly advancing is here. So the Russians are trying to close off this area. So basically, if they close off that area, and they have this area here, um, then they can begin to move in this direction, which is doesn't have many natural barriers of big cities, and they can continue to move on towards um, a flanking position here along these cities. So anyway, the goal of the Russians is to try to cover this area here, and um, and create a cauldron for Konstantinovka. And so anyway, let's look at another area. There aren't too many reports from this whole area, the Kliban Beak um, area, or which would be a Kliban Beak cauldron. It's hard to say whether it's a cauldron or not because it doesn't look like the Russians have completely closed off this area. But we were expecting this Kliban Bik to be cleaned up by the Russians, but there's intense fighting along the whole front line. Um, there's very little news about the Chasiv Yar area, which is very strange because this is where there was a lot of fighting, and it took the Russians a long time to push the Ukrainians out of Chasiv Yar. So it looks like that area has been stabilized. Now let's continue to go. There's Fedorivka area. Um, this area has been taken by the Russians, so this is not a large area, but if you can see what the Russians are doing, they take this area and then they're going to continue to move this way. Again, it's a flanking maneuver to trap Siversk in a cauldron. So, and then the Russians are advancing north um, of Siversk, near Liman, and so they're advancing in this area here, Zarichne. Let's see if the deep state has registered that. They have not registered that yet. There's also Russian advances in this area here, near Chandrilove. So again, you can see what the Russians are doing. Um, uh, they're trying to close off this area and then create a cauldron and create a cauldron here. So they trap Lyman and Siversk, and then on the other side they can create another flanking maneuver and to trap these major cities. So anyway, this looks like something that may be carried out in a spring offensive. I don't think the Russians will be um, able to get there in the fall, but we will see. And if we move north, um, there is some advances here in the Kupiansk area. So here the deep state map still has the area north of Mirne as Ukrainian controlled, but according to Russian and neutral mappers, this is now a gray area, and so the Ukrainians may or may not have control. Um, Also, we have to be careful with the flags that are raised by quick crews that come in to a town, raise a flag, and then rush back out. So it can be very deceptive and hard to know. But anyway, the it looks like the Russians have restored their control of this area, and so apparently, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, the Russians had taken an area down here. Um, and I don't think that's the right drawing, but anyway, um, let's try that again. So they would have taken an area down to this area here, and then over here. But there's no evidence currently that they have taken this area. In fact, they have been bombing some areas around Kupiansk, which looks to be in an area that they supposedly controlled. But the big news for this area is north of. You can see if we right here on the Russia-Ukraine border, you can see the advances of the Russian forces here north of Kamyanka. So you can see that the Russians are moving in this direction. They're making progress. More than likely, the Ukrainians had to shuffle their forces in order to try to shore up the Pokrovsk um, urban urban area, and so this has left them shorthanded. And um, so we see advances of the Russians here. We see also advances in the Russians in Vovchansk. They are. Let's see if it's registered here in Deep State. It's not registered in Deep State. So the Russians are moving in this direction, um, and so anyway, this is another area where they pulled forces from to try to shore up Pokrovsk. And so you can see that the Russians are testing the. Let's see if we have any advances here in the Sumy area. So we don't see any advances in the Sumy area according to Deep State, but the Russians are probing all along this front line where, on the border of Russia, Ukraine, to see where the Ukrainians are thin on troops. So, anyway, I will end my report here. And so, in any case, it looks like the Ukrainians are making small advances in the area around Pokrovsk, and the Russians are making advances in other areas. So, in the areas of Vovchansk, it's north of Kupiansk. They've restored their their control north of Kupiansk, and they are advancing north of Lyman, south of Siversk, and near Konstantinovka. No updates. Um, Near Pokrovsk, as I mentioned, the Russians are advancing towards Pokrovsk, and the Ukrainians are advancing to Novo Ekonomichne to try to close off this Russian advance. And and also in this area, I don't even know what the big city is here, but to give it a name. But anyway, this whole area, Ola, Oleksandrokad and Malivka. Let's see now. So we see Yanvarsk. That's an advance, and small advances in the Orkhiv area, and the deep state map recognized the Russian advances here north of Plavny. So anyway, that's my report for today. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be back tomorrow with another update. Farewell.